Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. As you know, our hearings were suspended in March when the government made it clear that large gatherings were to be avoided if at all possible. At that stage, the number of coronavirus infections was rising steadily, and I took the view that the only responsible course was to call a halt to the hearings. About a week later, the country went into lockdown, from which it's only recently begun to emerge. Indeed, we don't even know now how matters will develop from here. What we do know is that the virus is still active and capable of spreading quickly if proper precautions are not taken. For the benefit of those who are not directly involved in the inquiry, I'd like to make it clear that the suspension of hearings has not meant that there's been any pause in any other aspects of our work. Members of the inquiry team working from home have ensured that the process of gathering evidence, both in the form of documents and witness statements, and disclosing materials to core participants, has continued without interruption. Preparations for questioning those whom we intend to call as witnesses have advanced steadily, and outstanding questions relating to the scope of the Attorney General's undertaking have been resolved. As a result, we are well placed to make steady progress now that it has become possible to resume hearings, albeit with a limited number of people in the hearing room. I know I speak for the whole inquiry team when I say that we considered it essential in the public interest to start taking evidence again as soon as it was possible to do so. However, in order to comply with government guidelines, which are designed to ensure the safety of all those who will be using our premises, it has been necessary to make a number of changes to the way in which we use the space at our disposal. I'm very grateful to the team and to those who advise us on health and safety matters for the work they've done to enable us to resume hearings today, just as lockdown is being eased. It is not possible under present conditions to allow members of the public in general, or even those core participants most directly affected by the fire, to attend the hearings in person. I greatly regret that, but the proceedings are being live streamed as before. Those who wish to do so can therefore follow them minute by minute as they unfold. Legal representatives for core participants will be able to suggest questions for the witnesses to counsel to the inquiry or raise points as necessary by email. The panel will ensure that there are adequate breaks in order to collate and consider those questions. We shall continue to monitor closely the government's advice and guidance on the response to the pandemic and shall take whatever steps are open to us to ensure that our hearings are as accessible to the public as possible. When hearings were suspended, we just heard the evidence of Miss Kate Cooney, the first of a number of witnesses from Exova, the fire consultants who were engaged to advise on the Grenfell Tower refurbishment project. Today we're going to hear evidence from the second of the Exova witnesses, Dr. Clare Barker. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Mr. Chairman, Mrs. Panel Member, thank you very much indeed. I now call Dr. Clare Barker, please.
Please can I ask you to read the witness affirmation text that appears on the screen?
I do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barker. Sit down and make yourself comfortable. Now, Mr. Millett, before you start with the witness, we shall need to take a break during the morning.
Yes.
Can I leave it to you to identify a convenient point around about 11:15 or between 11:15 and 11:30?
Yes. Yes, Mr. Chairman, certainly. Thank you very
much.
much. Dr. Barker, good morning.
Morning.
And can I say, first of all, thank you very much to you for coming down to London to give evidence to us. We do very much appreciate it. If you have any difficulty understanding the questions I'm going to ask you, I can rephrase them or ask the question in a different way, so please do say. Also, if you could please keep your voice up so that the transcribers to your right can get down accurately what you're saying, I'd be very grateful for that too.
Okay.
Now, you've made one witness statement to the inquiry, as I understand it, and that is EXO 401603. Can I please take you to that? You'll find it on the screen in front of you, but also in a folder on the desk there. It's dated the 27th of September 2018. Can I ask you please to go to page 5, first of all, where there's a signature above your name. Is that your signature?
It is.
Have you read this witness statement recently?
Yes,
And can you confirm that the contents are true?
I can.
Yes. And have you discussed your statement or your evidence with anybody before coming here today?
Just the legal team.
The legal team. Now, there are a number of exhibits to the statement which are shown on the schedule, which is at IDX 0057. I don't think there's any need to go to those, but I just read them into the record, say that they are publicly available should anybody wish to see them. Can I then start with some questions about your background and your experience, if I may? Now, if you go to your witness statement, please, at paragraph 2.1 on page 1, you'll see that you say there that you have an undergraduate degree in material science from Brunel University, London, which you obtained in 1995. Is that right?
That's correct.
And I think you also hold a PhD in carbon fibre composites from the University of Manchester Institute of Science and Technology.
Yes.
You do. When did you obtain that honour?
The PhD?
Yes.
2000.
2000. What CPD, professional development, or other professional development have you undertaken in fire engineering since you obtained your PhD in 2000?
I've done, well, from starting work at Warrington Fire Research in 2003, I did mainly on-the-job training to gain knowledge of the codes. Then we had training days within the fire engineering team as well to look at different fire engineering techniques that could be applied. I've also attended conferences, seminars on different subjects. I attended 2 conferences, on human behaviour and evacuation. But in terms of a formal fire engineering education at an establishment, say university, I haven't had any formal fire engineering.
Thank you. At the time of the Grenfell Tower project, were you a member of any professional bodies or institutions?
Yes.
Which ones were those?
Member of the Institution of Fire Engineers.
Institution of Fire Engineers. And I think you were at Exova from 2000 until 2015, working your way up to principal.
Sorry, I was at Exova from 2003 until 2015.
Yes.
You said 2000. So.
I'm so sorry, my mistake. 2003 until 2015. And is it right that you worked your way up to the position of principal fire engineer?
Yes, that's correct.
And you were principal fire engineer in and from 2009?
Yes.
Yes. What role, what did your role as principal fire engineer at Exova typically involve?
The main day-to-day work involved writing fire strategies for different projects in all sorts of different purpose groups, residential, hospitals, schools, warehouses. It would also involve supervising more junior members of staff within the office. There were 5 of us in the office at the time, and it would involve also reviewing their work as well.
When you say the office, is that the Warrington office?
That's the Warrington office,
yes. You just told us that the different purpose groups included residential, hospitals, schools and warehouses. Of residential, how much of your day-to-day work would have included, in general terms, after 2009, high-rise residential blocks?
I'd done 2 or 3.
2 or 3 in the period between 2009 and 2012, is that?
I can't actually remember. I know I have worked on 2 or 3, but one of them might have been before 2009.
Okay. As at mid-2012, how much experience had you had within Exova of carrying out a technical or peer review of a colleague's draft report for a client?
A lot of experience, because I reviewed their work for every project that they were working on. I would review a report that they'd done.
And how much experience had you had, as at that time, of establishing relevant fire safety issues for a particular building?
I would have said I'd had a lot of experience.
And same question again, how much experience at that time had you had of checking the adequacy of any fire safety advice given by your junior staff against the scope of the instructions under which Exova was retained?
I would have said I'd had quite a lot of experience in doing that.
I'm going to turn just briefly to the subject of what a fire safety engineer involves. Just to set it in context, is it right that you became involved with Grenfell Tower for the first time in July 2012 when you were asked by Andrew McCracken of Exova to attend a meeting with Studio E?
Yes, that's correct.
I'm going to come back to that, but can I just look at a document with you first? It's EXO 401613, please. This is your email of the 7th of August 2012 to Kate Cooney from you, and in which you say, see below. Do you see that?
Yes.
And underneath that, there is an email from Bruce Soanes to you of the 30th of July 2012. We're going to come back to that in more detail later on. Copied to Terry Ashton. And the long and the short of the exchange is that you were instructing Kate Cooney to prepare a fire safety strategy report for the existing building, the building as it stood.
Yes.
Now, in doing that, were you acting as a fire safety engineer?
Yes.
And were you carrying out fire engineering services?
In doing the reports?
Yes.
Yes.
And in in asking
Yes,
Kate
yes.
Cooney to do what she was to do.
Yes.
Yes. What do you understand to be a fire safety engineer?
My understanding of it is somebody who assesses a building design and talks about its adequacy in terms of fire safety, in how it meets the functional requirements of the building regulations, B1 to B5.
And what about the likely behaviour of materials and structures? Would that also be involved in acting as a fire safety engineer?
Yes, in that the strategy would contain high-level advice as to the performance requirements of those materials.
You say high level. What do you mean by that?
In terms of us, we would specify a fire resistance level. For example, we would say the elements of structure need to provide 2 hours fire resistance. We wouldn't necessarily include in the strategy how that is achieved.
I follow. Perhaps I can take this a little bit more quickly. Can I ask you please to be shown a document, MET 000065130, MET 000065130, at page 2. This is a witness statement given to the Metropolitan Police by Mr. Robert Vetch of Exova. Are you familiar with Mr. Vetch?
Yes, yes.
And this is paragraph 2 of his statement on that page. And although it's not numbered, it's the second paragraph down. He says there in the second sentence, do you see this? In preparing a fire safety strategy, you see that?
Yes.
He says the focus of the fire engineer is to try and understand what the safest means of escape is for people in that building, and they do this by looking at the building procedures, building structure, and the components within that building, this process is about life safety. It's not about property protection. And my question is, would you agree with Mr. Vetch about his description of a fire safety strategy there?
I would agree with most of it. When we're doing a fire strategy to meet the requirements, the functional requirements of the building regulations, we are looking at life safety. However, it doesn't necessarily mean looking at building procedures. You do have an evacuation procedure, but it doesn't necessarily consider the management of the building.
You say doesn't necessarily. Would it if the scope of services under which Exova was retained specified that it should?
Yes, I think it would refer to certain aspects of the management, but it wouldn't be a full fire safety manual, which would be more of a management document.
Okay. So can I just say that I understand to what extent you agree with Mr. Vetch here? Are you saying that it's not always a given that in any fire safety strategy you're always looking at the safest means of escape? It depends on the scope.
No, we're always looking at the safest means of escape because you're trying to ensure that the design complies with the requirements of the building regulations, which the requirement is that there is adequate means of warning and escape for the people in the building. So we would be looking at ensuring that there are safe means of escape for people from the building.
Right. So are you saying that when you don't always look at building procedures unless you're told to or asked to?
Yeah.
I see. And would that depend on the scope of the instructions for a specific project?
Yes.
I see. Now, can I then turn to relationships and responsibilities next as the next topic? Exova were asked to draft a fire safety strategy for the existing building in the summer of 2012. We know that from the documents. Can we just look and see what a fire safety strategy is? Can I ask you, are you familiar with the British Standard published document, BSI 4076/1716, current as at August 2012?
Sorry, could you repeat?
Well, let me show it to you first of all. If you could be shown BSI 401716.
Yes, I am familiar with that document.
You're familiar with that document, and you're familiar with the guidance, are you?
Yes.
Were you familiar with it in 2012?
Yes.
Can I then very quickly take you to page 7, which is paragraph or section 3.16, where a fire safety strategy is defined. It's at the top of the page there. Fire safety strategy, combination of fire safety measures that has been shown by reference to prescriptive codes or a fire engineering study to be capable of satisfying the specified fire safety objectives. Was that your understanding in mid-2012 of what a fire safety strategy was?
Yes.
Thank you. Can I ask you then to move to page 44 of the same document, which says under paragraph 9.7, fire safety strategy, and I'll just read it to you. The fire safety strategy for the building will be based on the successful trial design and is likely to comprise a range of physical fire safety measures and management procedures. A description of these measures should be provided, together with performance specifications and any recommended deviations from the relevant system codes. You see that? Mm-hmm. And again, as at mid-2012, was that your understanding of what a fire safety strategy should comprise?
Yes. However, I wouldn't have used BS 7974 or the published documents that went with it to do the fire safety strategy for Grenfell. We used the prescriptive code, approved document B.
All right. Can I just focus on the words "and management procedures" in the second line of that section? Mm-hmm. You'll see that it says likely to comprise a range of physical fire safety measures and management procedures. So as at mid-2012, was it your understanding that a fire safety strategy which complied with this guidance should comprise management procedures?
If it was complying with that guidance, yes.
Right. And what was it, in general, about the instructions that you received in the summer of 2012 in relation to the fire safety strategy for Grenfell Tower that you were to do, that Exova was to do, which meant that you weren't to look at management procedures or weren't to look or use this guidance?
The 7974 standard basically provides a framework for how you would go about doing a fire engineering strategy that is performance-based instead of being prescriptive. So there are essentially 3 different methods to go about the fire safety design for a building. You could use the guidance in Approved Document B, which is very general, or you could use the guidance that's now available in another standard, BS 9999, or you could use the performance-based approach, which you use the framework that's described in the BS 7974 document, and you would use the techniques described in the published documents that go along with that standard. For example, there is a published document about how you can look at how a fire develops. There is a published document that goes along with it that describes how smoke moves and how you can then calculate the requirements for smoke clearance systems. And there is another published document which talks about human behaviour. So you could use that in an analysis. And the prescriptive framework recommends that you have a meeting beforehand with all the stakeholders where you discuss the performance criteria, and then you provide your fire engineering analysis in your strategy to show that you have essentially met those conditions and the acceptance criteria have been met. That's not the same procedure as when you do a fire strategy using Approved Document B, which is what we did.
And what was it that told you that you should use Approved Document B when doing your strategy as the framework for it, as opposed to PD 7974?
Because Approved Document B is a very commonly used document. It's what most of the people in the regulatory authorities are familiar with. It's a general guidance document that's used a lot.
Yeah. Let me just repeat my question. What was it about your instructions that led you to use Approved Document B when doing your strategy as the framework, as opposed to PD 7974?
I don't think there was anything specific in the scope which said which documents I should use. I just decided that Approved Document B would be the most appropriate one to assess the building against.
I see. You decided that, did you?
Yes.
We'll come back to that in due course then, Dr. Barker. Can I then turn to your initial involvement in the Grenfell Tower project? And we mentioned a moment ago Andrew McCracken. Can I ask you please to look at EXO 50242? This is an email from him to you of the 24th of July 2012. Do you see that? Clare, as discussed, tar Andrew. And under it, he forwards to you an email from Margaret Trina to David Harris and him of the same date. Do you see that? Mm-hmm. And he simply says in his email to you, as discussed, and underneath it you can see Miss Trina's email. We'll look at that in a moment. Was this your first involvement with Grenfell Tower?
Yes.
Right. What was discussed between Andrew McCracken and you? Do you remember?
My recollection of it was I received a telephone call from him where he explained that he was unable to attend the meeting himself. Terry Ashton was unable to attend the meeting himself, and David Harris, who's referred to as Di here, was also unable to go to the meeting. So they wanted somebody to attend from Exova and asked that I go.
I see. And did you read Miss Trina's email?
Yes.
You did. And doing so, you can see that she says, and let's look at it together, she says, underneath that, I'm afraid you've drawn the short straw again due to Di going off tomorrow. And then she says, in the second paragraph, we have not been as involved, I don't think, as we should have, and Bruce is wondering whether we want to be involved, is my impression, which could be wrong. You see that? Mm-hmm. Do you know what was the reason that Miss Trina thought Exova had not been as involved as it should have been?
I think it was possibly due to Terry's absence from work.
I see. And did you discuss that with Miss Trina or Mr. McCracken?
I can't remember.
Right. When you say you think, is that you remembering now, or was that your thought at the time?
That was my thought at the time because Terry had been absent for a lot longer than we initially anticipated.
I see. All right. Now, in the first sentence, as I've read it to you, Miss Trina, suggests that the person dealing with the Grenfell Tower fire safety strategy has, she says, drawn the short straw. Why was working on this project a short straw?
Possibly because of the distance from Warrington to London. We have a London office, but nobody was available from that office to attend the meeting, which meant that somebody had to travel down from Warrington.
You say possibly. Is that you speculating now, or was that your thought at the time, that was the reason?
That was the reason at the time.
Okay. I see. So the distance between Warrington and London presented, is this right? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is this the way you saw it? That presented a bit of an inherent problem in producing the existing fire safety strategy for Grenfell Tower?
I don't think the distance presented a problem. I think people's workload and capacity at the time was a factor.
I understand. Workload and capacity. You mentioned distance. Mm-hmm. So do we add to the list distance as well?
Yes.
Yes. Now, you then attended a project meeting on the 26th of July 2012. Do you remember that?
Yes, I have a recollection of it.
Okay. Now, the minutes are at EXO 00001620. If we can please have those up. This is project meeting number 5 at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at Appleyards, who became known not long after this as Artelia. And if you look at the list of those present, you can see 3 from the bottom that you are there, and at the bottom of the list, Mr. Soanes is there as well from Studio E. Now, there's no need to look at it, but your statement at paragraph 3.4 says that this meeting was the only meeting in relation to Grenfell Tower that you attended. Is that right?
Yes.
Right. When you attended this meeting on the 26th of July 2012, had you seen the Exova fee proposal of the 11th of June 2012?
Yes.
You had. Do you remember when you first saw that document?
I think it was when Andrew forwarded me Margaret's email, because I think from that email they were attached.
Yeah, I see. So that would have been 2 days before.
Yes.
Perhaps we could just verify that and chase that up. If you could go back to it, please. It's EXO 50242. Let's just double check if we can. And it does look as if the attachments comprise 2 fee proposals there. So one of them, yes, we can chase those up if we need to, but we know there were 2.
Yes.
One for the existing and one for the outline proposed, and one of them would have been that. So 24th of July 2012. Now, if you go to the minutes, they record discussions relating to the design for the refurbishment. If we could just go back to this again, it's 1620. And if you look down, we can see that the general discussion, if you're just shown the next page or two, is the design for the refurbishment of Grenfell Tower. So can we take it that you knew by the 26th of July that Grenfell Tower was to be refurbished?
Yes.
Yes. Can we go to page 4 of this document, please, under the heading Quantity Surveyor? And you can see at the bottom there, just above next meeting, it records that there is no existing fire strategy for the building, Exova to proceed, and then the action list, Exova. Was there any discussion at the meeting about the absence of any existing fire strategy for the building? Do you remember?
There may have been, but I don't remember.
Did it surprise you that a high-rise residential building in use since 1974 had no existing fire strategy at all?
No, not really, because of the age of it.
Because of the age of it?
Because it was a considerably old building.
If it had been a younger building, what date of construction would it have had to have in order to have an existing fire safety strategy?
I would have expected something that was constructed in the 90s to have had a strategy.
Right. So was it your understanding that existing fire safety strategies came with the building when constructed, as opposed to being done later in relation to an existing building?
It possibly could have had one if it had been refurbished over the life of the building.
Right. Can I just ask a side question here? What influence on your thinking did the fact that did the existence of the regulatory reform order from 2004 have on the need to have a fire safety strategy in multi-occupancy buildings whenever they were constructed?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes. What influence on your thinking did the requirements of the regulatory reform order have on the need to have a fire strategy for the building, regardless of when it was constructed?
I don't think it had much influence.
All right. Were you given any instructions at this meeting or any guidance as to the scope of work?
I don't remember.
Were you given any indication as to the purpose of producing the existing fire safety strategy in relation to the refurbishment works?
I don't remember being given any instruction at that meeting with regard to that.
When it said Exova to proceed, was that recording you agreeing to proceed to produce an existing fire safety strategy?
Yes.
Right.
Once we'd received the fee acceptance.
I see. So when it says Exova to proceed, can we take it that you agreed to proceed on the basis of the instructions contained in the 11th of June 2012 fee proposal?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, let's look and see what was discussed during the meeting. If you go to page 2, please, first of all, back 2 pages, you can see that it says under architecture, in the second paragraph, window samples and possible insulated brick slip system tabled, proposal to clad over the columns at ground with in situ high quality concrete finish. Do you remember what that was about?
No.
On page 3, under services, in services starts at the bottom of the previous page on the screen, but it says actually it's the top of page 3 if we can. It's under services, which starts at the bottom of the previous page. Coordination of cladding. Do you see that?
Yes.
Heating and seasons critical. Input required from Leadbitter. Where it says coordination of cladding, do we take it from that you understood that part of the refurbishment would include overcladding the exterior of Grenfell Tower?
Yes, but I don't remember. I don't remember that discussion from the meeting.
You don't remember the discussion? No. Okay. Well, let's just finish this off and see if the next thing I'm going to show you triggers a recollection. Page 3, same page, under contractor, Leadbitter have considered option of being able to complete overcladding before and independent of removal of existing windows. So does that trigger a recollection that there was, at that point, or from that point, a proposal to overclad Grenfell Tower as part of the refurbishment?
No, I really can't remember.
All right. At the time, did you consider that cladding this building would present any particular issues or problems with regard to fire safety?
No, I didn't.
Now, Mr. Soanes says in his statement, I ought to show it to you just so you're clear about it. It's SEA 3014273 at page 51. SEA 3014273, page 51, at paragraph 108. Do you see that, Dr. Barker? He says there that it's just three quarters of the way through the paragraph, and he refers to an email, which I don't need to show you yet. He says, it was prompted by my having pressed for Exova to attend. My recollection is that Clare was covering for others and had to travel some distance and had little to contribute for much of the meeting. Despite this, I felt it was important Exova were represented, given the importance of fire safety. Do you agree with what he says there, or with his recollection?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, given that I think, as you told us, you knew that Grenfell Tower would be overclad, although not the details, did you raise the need to carry out a fire assessment specifically in relation to the proposed cladding system as the proposal then stood?
No.
Is there a reason why you didn't suggest, either at this meeting or separately to Mr. Soanes, that advice on the specific cladding system should be included in the fire safety strategy, either the one that you were being asked to do or the outline proposed for the refurbishment?
No.
Is there a reason why? Well, let me ask it differently. Was the question of the need for cavity barriers within the cladding that should form part of the fire strategy discussed at all?
Not at that meeting.
Not at that meeting. Let's then look at the fee proposal, if we can. So I'm just changing to that topic and to look at it. It's at TMO 100377721. And this is addressed to Mr. Soanes, dated the 11th of June 2012, and as you've told us, you first saw this in Mr. McCracken's email to you of the 24th of July 2012. How familiar were you with this brief and proposal when you, as we come to, instructed Kate Cooney to carry out the drafting of the strategy?
I was familiar with it. I'd read it.
You'd read it. And did you understand what was within the scope?
I think I did at the time.
Okay. Let's look at that. It's at page 2 of 10 under proposed scope of work. And if you just look at that, it says that the aim of the work would be the production of a retrospective fire safety strategy report for the existing building. And then it goes on to say, this report will serve to inform the fire safety risk assessment and fire risk management plan for the building. The design of the building will be assessed against relevant design codes relating to the statutory requirements on the design of the building under the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005 and also under Section 20 of the London Building Acts Amendment Act 1939 if the building falls within the size criteria specified by that legislation. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Just focusing on those words at the moment. First of all, how was the report or the strategy that was to be produced inform the fire safety risk assessment?
So the fire strategy sets down how the building design meets the functional requirements of the building regulations. So, for example, it will say that a certain standard of door is required to the stair, or a certain fire resistance is required, or that certain means of warning are required. So when those items are in the strategy, when a fire risk assessment is carried out once the building is occupied, then the risk assessor can go around and check that those items are there. The risk assessor will check that escape routes are kept clear, and will also check that the warning systems, etc., are there that have been specified in the strategy.
I see. How was the report that you were to draft, or that Ms. Cooney was instructed by you to draft, to inform the fire risk management plan for the building, as you can see there?
So that would be with regard to the stay-put policy for the flats. However, the other parts of the building, at the boxing club and the nursery, were essentially separate entities with a different evacuation procedure, whereas theirs would be a simultaneous evacuation procedure.
You say theirs. What do you mean by theirs?
The boxing club
I see.
would operate on a simultaneous evacuation. The nursery
would
operate on a different evacuation procedure.
And what about the other parts of the building, namely the residential parts? What evacuation procedure would they have?
They would have a stay-put policy.
So do you call a stay-put policy an evacuation
Or remain in
procedure?
place. Yes, it is. Yeah.
I mean, you say it is. I mean, is that the common parlance and understanding at the time?
It is. Yes.
I see. How did you envisage that the existing fire safety strategy that was to be produced would assist the TMO in discharging their duties under the regulatory reform fire safety order?
Again, they would know what systems there were in the building that would need to be checked and maintained.
Was it part of putting this report together that you would talk to the TMO to find out what they knew about those parts of or systems in the building that needed to be checked and maintained?
Probably at some point, yes.
At some point in what process?
Probably, well, the draft report was produced with a number of caveats in it and things that needed to be clarified. So at some point after that, it would...
Very well. We'll come back to revisit that question in due course. We don't see any reference here to the health and safety legislation. Was the report to inform compliance with that?
No.
No. Okay. The scope of the work, if you continue down, says that in the next paragraph, the scope of the work for the project would therefore include a site visit expected to take no longer than half a day to survey the building's architecture and fire safety systems, and the compilation of the fire safety strategy report. You see that?
Yes.
What was the purpose of the proposed site visit?
I assume that the person that went to site would look at the detection systems that were present, to look at any ventilation system that was present within the lobbies to the flats on the residential levels, to look at if there was any ventilation at the head of the stair. And a general walk round of the building to look at where the escape routes were from the residential and from the other parts of the building, the other non-residential parts of the building.
How important to carrying out the proposed scope of work was the proposed site visit?
I would have said it was fairly important.
So fairly. Can you help elaborate?
Yes, it would have certainly informed the fire safety strategy report by knowing what was there on site.
Yes. Did you expect a record of the site visit to be kept?
I did think that one would have been made by the person who did the site visit.
Right. And again, Dr. Barker, we'll come back to the site visit question a little bit later. Just continuing down through this scope, if we can. It says under, in the fourth paragraph down, this scope of works, if you just follow that with me, this scope of works is based on the assumption that a detailed appraisal is not required of the structural fire protection to the load-bearing elements of structure or of the fire compartmentation within the building. However, if it should transpire during the site survey that such an appraisal is necessary, then the scope of works can be extended to cover this, subject to a separate fee agreement. On what basis was the assumption made, to the best of your recollection, that an appraisal of the structural fire protection of the compartmentation was not necessary?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
Is that something that you queried with either Mr. Soanes or the person who put this proposal together, James Lee?
I would say it was assumed that because the building was a concrete building, that it possessed the necessary fire resistance, as well as because at the time that it was constructed, it was required to be a building with 2-hour fire resistance to the structural elements. As it says underneath about carrying out a site survey to do that appraisal, that wouldn't be something that we could do.
Right. Did you know that James Lee, who's the author of this proposal, had undertaken a site visit on the 29th of May 2012?
I know that now. I didn't know that when I went to the meeting.
On the meeting on the 26th of July. I see. Would it follow that you didn't know at that time that he had taken photographs of the tower?
No, I didn't know at that time.
Now, you said a minute ago you know that now. When did you learn that Mr. Lee had made a site visit on the 29th of May 2012?
It was after I'd been to the meeting when the job folder for the project was copied to the Manchester server, because it was originally on the London server.
The job folder for the project?
Yes, each project has an electronic job folder on the server.
Can I just explore that a little? When was the job folder copied to the Manchester server first? Do you remember?
I think it was after I'd been to the meeting, so it was sometime after the week after, during the next week. So it would be week commencing the 30th, I think.
Yes. And what was in the job folder? Do you remember?
The job folder has the fee proposals in it, and that was where the photographs were taken.
Was there anything else in the job folder at that time?
I don't remember there being anything else in there.
Would you have expected there to be anything else in the job folder?
Not in terms of a report or anything. I thought that there might have been drawings if drawings had been sent over in order to do the fee proposals for the refurbishment, because there were the 2 fee proposals. I thought there might have been a bit more of a summary of James's findings from his site visit, but I don't remember seeing anything.
Do you remember thinking that you should follow up and find out whether there was a summary in existence of James Lee's visit?
No, because if he had have done one, he'd have put it in the job folder.
I see. So can we just get this right? That you looked at the job folder, you saw that James Lee had not put in it a report of his site visit, so did you assume that therefore he had not done one?
Yes.
I see. Would it be unusual for James Lee or a senior fire consultant in his position to have made a site visit and not made a report?
It would depend on the job, and I wasn't that familiar with projects that James had worked on during his time at Exova, with him being from a different office. But I did assume, or I would have thought, that there would have been a bit more by way of some summary of findings from his site visit.
Right. Now, do you remember when James Lee... Sorry, let me try this differently. It's right, isn't it, I think, that James Lee left Exova in July 2012?
He did. He left the Friday before I went to the meeting.
So the 20th?
Yes.
That's the date he puts in his statement.
Yes.
So does that tell us that you first became involved in Grenfell Tower on the 24th of July, 4 days after he had left?
Yes.
Did you have any opportunity to speak to James Lee, whether about his May site visit or anything else about Grenfell Tower?
No, I didn't.
Right. So can we take it from that he never told you about whether it was safe to assume that the appraisal of the structural fire protection to the load-bearing elements of the structure or fire compartmentation wasn't required?
No, he never did.
And so can we also take it that you would never have had a conversation, didn't have a conversation with him at all about what he found on his site visit?
No, I didn't.
Do you know whether anybody else in Exova had a conversation with James Lee about his site visit in May to Grenfell Tower?
I don't know whether anybody did.
Right. Now, halfway down the page, it says, still under proposed scope of work, in developing the report, we would use our expert knowledge of fire safety design codes. You see that?
Yes.
Which codes were those, do you think?
Approved document B.
That's approved document B. Is that, or was that, your own personal assumption of what James Lee was proposing in this fee proposal, or was that something that you got from something else within the fee proposal?
I don't know, really. I think given that it was an existing building, it was more straightforward to use approved document B as the benchmark and measure it against that.
Yeah, I see. When you instructed, and let's just leap forward a little bit in time, but when you instructed Kate Cooney to proceed to draft the existing fire safety strategy, did you have a conversation with her about using approved document B as the fire safety design code, so to speak, as opposed to any other code?
Yes.
You did?
Yes.
Okay. Now, can we then move on to your team and your role? It was envisaged in the fee proposal that the fire safety team would be based in the London office. If you want, you can see that on the same page we're still on, under fire engineering team. You see that?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Cooney told the inquiry back in March that normally this project would have been run out of the London office.
That's correct, yes.
Right. That was my first question. My next question is, what changed which meant that the Warrington team from the Warrington office was to carry it out?
Well, James left and Terry was absent at the time. I also think due to workload at the time, David Harris, who was, he didn't run the London office, but he was in charge. I think he was the director. He also wasn't based all the time down in London, so he didn't have a lot of capacity to take on the work. And the other members of the team in London didn't have the capacity to do it. So due to Bruce pressing for somebody to attend, we were asked in Warrington to help out.
I see. Now, as we know from this document, James Lee was the consultant who would lead the project, wasn't he?
Yes.
And he says in his witness statement, and we can look at it if you like, but I'll quote from it verbatim. He says, "This would mean acting as a project manager and handling the day-to-day contact with the client in relation to the work stream." First of all, is what I've just read out to you from his statement correct in your understanding of what that role involved?
Yes.
When he left the project, who was assigned, do you remember, to take his place to lead it?
When I went to the meeting, I understood that Terry would be taking over the project for the refurbishment, because we'd been informed, and I relayed this to the design team, that Terry would be back on the 6th of August. So he was going to be doing that role for the refurbishment.
Yes.
But as the requirement for the existing building fire strategy seemed to be more pressing as well, we decided that the existing building fire strategy would be carried out from the Warrington office.
Yes, and my question, who was assigned to take James Lee's place to lead the project for the existing fire safety strategy that was the subject of this fee proposal?
Well, I suppose initially it was me, but then I handed that job to Kate.
Well, Kate wasn't leading the project. She was, as she has told us,
Well, it would
doing
be me
her
then.
work under your supervision.
Yeah, it would be me then.
You say it would be me. Was there actually any appointment or assignment of the lead role for the existing fire safety strategy?
Not formally, no.
Right. So at what point did you understand that you had taken James Lee's place as the leader of the project?
I suppose at the meeting.
You say you suppose at the meeting. Did you know that at the meeting, or is that something you're pulling together now?
Yes, I knew at the meeting.
All right. And would that mean, and did you understand it to mean at the time that you, as project manager from the meeting, 26th of July, would be managing the project until it was completed?
No, it was my understanding that I would be managing that project until Terry came back. And as soon as Terry came back, it was always my intention to hand that project back to Terry so that it could be run from the London office.
I follow. So just summarising, if I can, I hope accurately, where that takes us. You had taken over based on what you saw from the fee proposal and was going to lead the project temporarily until Terry Ashton took it over. Is that,
Yes.
have I got that right?
Yes.
I follow. Do you know why James Lee was not replaced on this project? And when I say this project, I mean the project for the existing fire safety strategy. Do you know why he wasn't replaced on that with a London-based lead when he left?
Well, I think the intention would have been for Terry to take over immediately, but Terry was absent due to illness. And I think that the other members of the team in the London office didn't have sufficient capacity
I see.
to take on the project.
Right. So, again, and if this is unfair as a summary, please say, but you were basically the Warrington stopgap leader.
Yes, that's fair to say.
Can I then turn to a slightly different topic, which is the information gathered to prepare the report for the existing fire safety strategy? What steps did you take, do you remember, to ensure that sufficient information regarding the existing building was obtained by Exova in order to produce a comprehensive existing building fire safety strategy?
We obtained the drawings for the building, the existing building. They were the original drawings for the building, and we also had the current fire risk assessment for the building. Then I believe that Kate contacted Bruce on a couple of occasions to obtain information regarding the ventilation of the common lobbies.
You mentioned the FRA.
Yes.
We will look at that in due course. Was that in the job folder you referred to, or did you get that separately?
I can't remember.
Okay.
Can't remember.
If you had got it separately, and I know this is something you may not remember either, but where would you think you would have got it from?
Either the client or the architects may have had it and emailed it to us.
Right. You say the client, that was who?
KCTMO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have any contact or connection with KCTMO other than perhaps the meeting of the 26th of July in relation to carrying out your work?
No.
No. During the meeting that we've just been discussing, you, I think, requested a copy of the specification for the smoke extract system for Grenfell Tower.
Yes.
Did you request any further information about the existing building?
Just the drawings.
Just the drawings. Why didn't you ask for any further information?
I can't remember.
Okay. Did you have a discussion with Miss Cooney when you instructed her that she would need to obtain further information about the existing building in order to carry out her work?
I believe I did, yes.
What information or documents did you discuss with her that she would have to get?
The drawings and the fire risk assessment.
Right. We'll come and see the instructions in a moment, but were there further drawings that neither of you had at that time, which you felt you needed?
For the existing building?
Yes.
I'm not aware that we needed any other drawings.
Right. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn to a different topic, which won't produce an obvious break in the next 5 minutes. It may be convenient to the witness and to you to take one now. I'm in your hands.
The next topic will take more than 5 minutes.
Yes, it will.
10, 15? I mean,
No. Yes, probably more than that, actually. Maybe 15 minutes.
I think we'll keep going.
All right, very good.
Is that the right value, Dr. Barker?
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Barker. I'd like to examine with you then the next topic, which is allocation of resources and internal processes, as at the summer of 2012. Can we first look, please, at EXO 50668? Now, this is an email chain, which actually finishes on the 8th of August 2012, as you can see at the top. Can we look down, please, at an email earlier in the chain at page 3? This is an email from you to Bruce Soanes on the 30th of July 2012. You see that?
Yes.
And you say, good afternoon, Bruce. Thank you for sending me the information regarding the smoke exhaust stroke ventilation. You see that?
Yes.
And then you tell him in the first paragraph, first main paragraph, that you had not received the acceptance from Appleyards of the fee proposal for the existing building, only for the upgrade.
Yes.
See that?
Yes.
And we know that you received that acceptance the next day. You don't need to see it, just for our purposes and the transcript. It's EXO 50122. But you go on to say in this email, in the third paragraph, in terms of allocating resources to this project, I'm happy to work on the fire strategy for the existing Grenfell Tower from the Warrington office and will aim to get the report to you before the deadline of the 16th of August. You see that?
Yes.
And then you go on to say July and August are generally fairly quiet months for the fire engineering division, as it is holiday time for a lot of people. However, this year it seems to have gone a bit mad, and we will have had a number of large projects come in at once. As I mentioned at the meeting, my colleague Terry Ashton will be back at work on the 6th of August, so it may be better if he continued with the project during the RIBA C to E stages, as I'm on annual leave for the last 2 weeks in August. I hope this is acceptable. First of all, where do you think you got the deadline of the 16th of August from?
That was my last day at work, so that's where I've got the deadline from.
Right, okay, so this wasn't a deadline imposed by him or extraneous circumstances, it was essentially personal.
I think so now. I do remember writing it down at the time. However, I haven't got those notes anymore. But yes, that was my last day in work before annual leave. So I just connected the two, and it was the understanding that the strategy needed to be done for then, or the first draft of the existing strategy needed to be done for then, because otherwise we would be into September.
Right. Now, you say we've just seen it in the fifth main paragraph, just in the penultimate line, it may be better if Terry Ashton continued with the project during the RIBA C to E stages. And that's because you're on annual leave for the last 2 weeks in August. Did you know what relevant qualifications or experience Mr. Ashton possessed that would make it appropriate for him to continue with the project?
Yes. He's a very experienced engineer who's spent a lot of time working in local authority building control.
Right. And what about qualifications?
In terms of a fire engineering qualification,
yes,
he didn't have one.
Right. Do you know whether Mr. Ashton had undertaken formal training or education relating to fire engineering?
I don't know specifically, no.
Why did you consider that Mr. Ashton was the most appropriate person within Exova to deal with this project?
Because he was the senior member in the London team, and because he'd had over 30 years of experience working in building control, where he'd had experience with fire strategies, and he knew the code and the building regulations.
Right. Do you know what experience he had specifically in advising on fire safety strategies for overcladding high-rise residential buildings?
I don't know what experience he had specifically.
You refer to his experience as 30 years of experience working in building control, where he had experience with fire strategies and knew the codes and building regulations. Why was that relevant to the production of an existing fire safety strategy specifically?
Because I suppose he's spent a number of years on the other side of the table, in effect.
Right.
So you produce a fire safety strategy normally for a building. Well, generally you produce a fire strategy for a building that hasn't been built yet, and you are presenting that design to the regulatory authorities for their approval. So approved document B is one of the most, or compliance with approved document B is one of the most common methods of doing that. So Terry has been on the other side, he's been on the regulatory side. So he knew how to apply the code to the designs.
Yes, I see. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, would it follow that he also knew what building control would accept?
Yes, I suppose he would have a good idea of what building control would
Yes,
accept.
I see. Okay. Now, yes, I see. Was there anybody else in the office, given that you, Ms. Cooney, and take it from me, Andrew McCracken were all due to go on holiday from the 17th of August, and things had gone a bit mad. Was there anybody else in the office who could have done the job other than Mr. Ashton?
In the London office
In the London
or the
office?
Warrington office?
In either, actually.
In the London office, as I say, there was David Harris, who was on leave when I went to that meeting. Tony Pearson was in the London office, and I think there was a graduate, so I wouldn't have allocated the task necessarily to a graduate.
No.
And from memory, Tony didn't have the capacity to do it. Within the Warrington office, the other member of staff, Andrew Martin, he didn't have the capacity either.
What about Mr. Harris in the London office?
I don't think, I can't remember to be honest, but he was on leave, which is why I went to that meeting.
Yeah.
He could still have been on leave after that. I don't know whether he'd just gone on leave. I don't know.
Right. What qualifications and experience did Mr. Harris have to take over or do the existing fire safety strategy for Grenfell?
He hasn't got a fire engineering qualification. He does have an engineering degree, and he'd been working for Warrington Fire since 2001, so we'd had 10 years experience of producing fire strategies.
Did he have any experience of residential high-rise blocks?
I don't know.
You don't. Now, Mr. Soames replies to your email that we see here on the 7th of August, and that is at EXO 50668 at page 2. And he says, this is to you, copy to Mr. Ashton, apologies for not responding sooner. I've been distracted, but couldn't understand where you got the 16th of August deadline. This is the planning deadline. Any impact the fire strategy has on the overall scheme needs to be understood sooner than this. Ideal, we should be submitting a stage C type document to the client for the end of this week or next week. It would be enough to know that you've reviewed the scheme and have no significant comments / reservations to make, and the strategy for fire safety is achievable, and any implications on the layout and external works is understood by the rest of the design team. This might sound unreasonable, but the project has been live for some time, notwithstanding the delay on formal appointments. See attached markup provided by James Lee, dated 30th of May. I discussed it once with him over the phone, but I'm not convinced I've interpreted it correctly. Now, I've read that all to you because it's important you see it all. Is it right that you, and indeed Ms. Cooney, were suddenly under a huge pressure of time from Mr. Soames?
Yes, in some ways, because that email was implying that he wanted the Stage C report, which was for the refurbishment, and it was my understanding from the meeting that we'd had that Terry would be doing that when he came back from his absence, and that the existing fire strategy was something that we were carrying out. So then, I think that was where the confusion lay. But yes, it did put a bit of pressure on.
Yeah. In fact, the deadline was even sooner than what you thought was the deadline, namely the 16th of August.
Yes.
And I think we see this in a document, but you found that a bit irritating.
I think, yes, because I didn't know where the confusion had come from. Possibly it was me introducing my own deadline that had confused him. However, I thought I had made it clear that the Warrington office would not be doing the refurbishment work.
Was it? Did you think it was realistic to expect you and Ms. Cooney to produce the existing fire safety strategy and indeed the outline fire safety strategy for the refurbishment within the time frame which Mr. Soanes was demanding?
Yes, it wasn't unrealistic to expect two strategies in that time frame.
Did you protest to him?
I don't recall having a conversation with him.
Is there a reason why you didn't have a conversation with him, given that what he was asking you to do was unrealistic?
I can't remember.
Now, you forwarded this chain to Terry Ashton on the 8th of August, as we can see from the next document, EXO 50668 at page 1. Just scroll up. Same document, top email. Hi, Terry, hope you're well and recovered from your illness. This is you to Mr. Ashton, copied to Ms. Cooney. And you say there, I went to this meeting in your absence as I was asked to work from the London office that day. The email below from Bruce has irritated me a little, to say the least. I've asked Kate to do the fire strategy for the existing tower building, and so far this is the only part of the project that we've had the fees accepted on. If Bruce wants us to do the next stage, then we need to have the fees accepted. This has not happened yet. You see that?
Yes.
And then you say, the only thing that concerns me about the fire strategy for the upgrade is that both myself, Kate, and Andrew McCracken are all on annual leave from next Friday, 17th of August, for 2 weeks. And then it goes on about dates. In fact, I think it's right that you had actually sent Miss Cooney an email on the 7th of August, the day before, which suggests that you had by then asked her to undertake the compilation of the existing fire safety strategy.
Yes.
Yes, and just again, the reference to that, and we'll come back to it in a moment, is EXO 401613, just for our transcript. But just looking at this email we're on, EXO 50668, page 1, you mentioned that you're concerned about people being away, as I've read to you. And that was a concern. Did you have sufficient resources to submit a Stage C type document in the timescale stipulated by Mr. Soanes?
In the Warrington office, no.
What about the London office?
Well, I understood that Terry would be undertaking the Stage C report, and I was confident that Terry could produce a first draft of a Stage C report within the time frame that Bruce required.
Did you understand what information would need to be included in a Stage C report?
Yes.
What was that?
A Stage C report is quite a high level, and it can be quite a brief document where you state the requirements of B1 to B5. For example, you would say in the common lobbies, ADB requires that the travel distances are 7.5 metres in a single direction. Whereas when you get further through the REBA stages, you would state that, and then you would also state what the travel distances are, and if they didn't comply, what mitigating measures you were putting in place. So that there would be It would be quite a brief document.
Can I just ask you then to go back to Mr. Soanes's email of the 7th of August at page 2 in this email chain, where he says apologies for not responding sooner, and he refers to the stage C type document. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Can I just look at the last sentence of that paragraph? We looked at it before, but he refers there to the strategy for fire safety is achievable, and any implications on the layout and external works is understood by the rest of the design team. In his reference to external works, what did you understand him to mean there?
I take external works to mean the landscaping at the ground level that's outside the building within the site.
What about the overcladding, which had been discussed, to your knowledge, as you told us earlier, at the 26th of July project meeting that you attended when you came down to London?
I don't think he means that.
Why is that?
Because I think he would have said cladding if he meant cladding, not external works.
I see. Now, in that same email, he refers, as we've seen, to an attached markup provided by James Lee of the 30th of May. Do you remember whether you asked Mr. Soanes if he needed assistance in interpreting that document?
No, I didn't ask him.
Do you know whether he was ever provided with assistance in interpreting it?
I don't know for sure. However, I think that Kate looked at that drawing markup.
Right.
Because I think that is the 4th floor alterations that were proposed.
Now, is it right, looking forward, that all Exova produced in the timescale stipulated by Mr. Soanes for the upgrade works, as he calls it, was the initial design note of the 12th of September 2012 produced by Mr. Ashton?
I think so, but I'm not sure.
Right. Did you ever look at that initial design note yourself?
No, I didn't.
You didn't. So if I were to ask you questions about it, do I take it you wouldn't be able to answer?
No.
All right.
Wouldn't.
I'm now going to turn to the next topic, or a subtopic, which is the handover to Miss Cooney. That may be an appropriate moment, Mr. Chairman.
Could be a good point, could it?
Yes.
Now, I'll give you a little bit of help, Mr. Millett. How long do you think we should take? I know we've made it clear to everyone that we're going to take long enough breaks to enable you to consider any material coming in from
Yes.
lawyers who are not present in the room. You probably don't know at the moment.
I think if we take 15 minutes, I don't know at the moment, if we take 15 minutes, that ought to be enough. I wouldn't want to take more than 15 minutes.
Right, well,
We're making reasonable progress, I should say.
Good, thank you. Well, that's very helpful. What I'm going to say is that we'll have a break now. Dr. Barker, give you a bit of a chance to stretch your legs. We'll come back at 11:45.
Very good, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
So if you'd like to go with the usher now, she'll take you back to the witness room and we'll resume at 11:45, please. Oh, before you go, please don't talk to anyone else about your evidence while you're out of the room. Okay, thank you very much. It will only be 1/4 of an hour in the event.
That's right.
11:45, please. Thank you. Yes, would you like to ask Dr. Barker to come back, please? All right, ready to carry on, Dr. Barker?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Swindon.
Dr. Barker, I'd now like to examine with you the handover to Kate Cooney. Now, in your statement at paragraph 3.10, we perhaps ought to look at it. It's EXO 401603 at page 3, please. You say there that you asked Kate Cooney to produce the fire safety strategy for the existing building, and you say in the last sentence, you say, I cannot remember exactly why I asked Miss Cooney to take over this task, but I expect it was due to my having limited capacity over the summer period. Does that mean that ordinarily you would have produced the first draft of the fire safety strategy yourself?
Yes.
Now, if we can go, please, to an email we saw before, which was EXO 50668, page 3. This is the email we looked at before together, Dr. Barker, of the 30th of July 2012, where you say, good afternoon, Bruce, thank you for sending me the information. You see that?
Yes.
And in the second paragraph, we looked at this briefly, about the fee proposal. You say in the last sentence there, I telephoned him, that's Mr. Hale, David Hale at Appleyards, to tell him we'd accepted the wrong fee and he's going to email us the right fee acceptance to us tomorrow. And then you say this, so that once that arrives, we can get started. You see that?
Yes.
Now, the fee proposal was accepted on the 31st of July 2012. We referred to that earlier. And again, for our records, that's EXO 50122. But we don't see that you instructed Miss Cooney to carry out the drafting until the 7th of August. Is that right?
I think so, yes.
Do you know why you waited an entire week between the 31st of July, when you accepted the fee proposal, and the 7th of August?
I think that was because we didn't receive the drawings until then
I see.
for the existing building. Then when we did receive them, they were microfiche drawings.
Right. Did you make it... First of all, where did you get those drawings from, or from whom did you get them?
I can't remember, but I would have assumed, and I may be wrong, that the architects would have sent them.
Right. Do you recall at all pressing Mr. Soanes to send you the drawings so that you could get your work started, as you said you would?
I don't recall pressing Bruce, but I believe that Kate did chase for the drawings.
Right. So I'm just wondering why it was, given that you already had a very tight deadline for the production of the strategy report, and said you could get started as soon as the fee acceptance comes, that you don't push hard to get the drawings so that you can do the work. Can you explain that?
No, I can't explain it.
Okay.
It was just until we had the drawings, we couldn't really start work.
All right. Now, we have two emails on the 7th and the 8th of August, respectively, where we can see that you sent Kate Cooney some information. Can we have those, please? First of all, it's EXO 401613, 7th of August. Where, on the 7th of August, you can see, top of the page, you send Miss Cooney some documents. Do you see those?
Yes.
And one of them is the specification for the smoke, exhaust and ventilation to the residential lobbies and other tower documents. Yes? Yes. And the next document is the 8th of August, next day, EXO 401615. If we could just have that, please. Where we see that you send her two documents meeting number 7, agenda, and notes from what you call meeting 6, but was in fact meeting 5 of the 26th of July 2012, which you attended. Now, I haven't taken you to the documents for you to confirm that, but we have confirmed that from looking at the attachments. Do you recall that those were what you sent her on that date, or do you want to look at the documents?
I don't remember sending her them, but I did.
Yeah. Yes, and take it from me that meeting 6 hadn't happened, and it was meeting 5. Do you remember whether you gave any other information to Kate Cooney in order to enable her to draft the existing fire safety strategy?
No, I didn't give her any more information.
Did you provide Miss Cooney with the fee proposal and scope of works document of the 11th of June that Mr. Lee had proposed?
I don't think I physically provided her with the documents, but she was aware that they were in the job folder.
She was aware that they were in the job folder. Mm-hmm. Did you tell her that they were in the job folder?
I can't remember.
Was the job folder accessible to her in the ordinary way?
It was at that point, yes.
I see. Did you give her any specific instructions as to the scope of the works?
I instructed her to produce a fire strategy looking at the existing building to approve document B, to assess it in line with approved document B.
Did you do that in writing or orally?
Orally.
When did you do that orally?
I can't remember exactly, but it would have been that week because we used to sit next to each other in the same office.
Right. Was there anything in the fee proposal which had been signed by Mr. Lee, 11th of June, and accepted, that led you to think that approved document B would be the assessment, the basis of the assessment?
No.
So why did you instruct Ms. Cooney to use approved document B as the basis of the assessment, do you think?
Because I thought that was the most appropriate guidance document to use for this building.
And why is that?
Because the fire safety engineering guidance didn't seem to be appropriate. Approved document B covers a number of different types of purpose groups, one of which is residential flats. So it seemed appropriate to use that document.
Did you discuss the appropriateness of using approved document B with anybody else? Or did you just...
No, I didn't.
I see. Just go back a stage, a moment. You said a moment ago that ordinarily you would have carried out the existing fire safety strategy review and done the report. If you had done it, who would have reviewed it? Who would have peer reviewed it?
Andrew McCracken.
I see. Do you remember whether you had any other discussions with Miss Cooney in advance of her going ahead and drafting the existing fire safety strategy?
I don't remember any specific discussions. However, because we worked in the same office and sat next to each other, you do discuss things on an ad hoc basis throughout the day. So it's likely that discussions would have occurred. I just can't remember them.
Did you give her a deadline to which to work in order to produce a first draft?
We were working to the deadline of the 16th of August.
Was that...
Well, no, it was, sorry. That was the date for sending the first draft out. She would need to produce that a day or two before so that I could review it.
And that 16th of August deadline you told us earlier was the date on which I think you were going on holiday.
That was my last day in work, yes.
And what about Miss Cooney?
I believe, because at the time I wasn't in the office on Friday, so my last day would have been a Thursday. Kate's would have been the Friday.
Yes, I see. So you were both working to a 16th of August deadline
Yes.
because of your impending holiday arrangements?
Yes.
Right. Now, I just want to ask you a few questions about the peer review process and your role. Can I ask you please to look at your witness statement, EXO 1603 at page 3. So 40s 1603, page 3. And let's look together, if we can please, at the bottom of that page, paragraph 3.13. On 15th of August 2012, you say, Ms. Cooney asked me to review the draft of the existing fire safety report, FSR, which she had prepared. This was the peer review of the existing FSR. A peer review involves reviewing the draft report alongside the drawings considered in order to produce that report, and to the relevant guidance referred to in the report, in this case approved document B, in order to ensure that the report was correct. See that?
Yes.
Now, at her witness statement, can I just ask you to see this? She, at paragraph 3.8, and this is EXO 401590, we can put them side by side if we can. I don't think we can, but I just want to show you this. EXO 401590, paragraph 3.8, she says, this is page 3, she says, on the 15th of August 2012, I asked Ms. Barker to review my draft of the existing FSR and sent her the drawings I had used in preparing that draft. The peer review process at Exova is part of the document quality control and typically involves someone of equal or greater seniority to the drafter reviewing the report to ensure that there are no clear errors and that it is sound in its basis. You see that?
Yes.
Can I next ask you, I should ask you first, do you agree with her? Do you agree with what she says there?
Yes.
Can I next ask you to look at Dr. Pearson's witness statement? This is EXO 401753, please. EXO 401753 at page 3. And let's go together and look at paragraph 3.9. And he says, the process of peer reviewing a report involves comparing what is written in the report with any floor plans provided and ensuring, 1, that the report is factually correct, 2, that it correlates with the plans, 3, that the approach taken is appropriate, for example, that the design is based on the appropriate design codes, or any fire engineering analysis are based on sound principles, 4, that it is correct where the report says that there is compliance with the cited design codes, and 5, that the facts, logic and mathematics of any fire engineering analyses are correct. Do you agree with that description of what the peer review process within Exova involved?
Yes.
Can I then next show you a document from Kate Cooney, EXO 50175. EXO 50175. This is an email from Ms. Cooney. It's the second one down on the page to you, Dr. Barker, on the 15th of August, timed at 15:37. You see that?
Yes.
And it says, Claire, please can you review the existing FSS for the above? I have printed out drawings. If these help, they probably will. You see that?
Yes.
And you respond the next day, 16th of August, at 15:22, saying you had reviewed it and it was fine. You say, I have reviewed it and it is fine. You see that?
Yes.
I want to ask you some questions now about your review. Now, first of all, Ms. Cooney says in her email, as you've just seen, that she's printed out drawings to assist you. Do you remember what those drawings were?
It would have been the floor plan layouts for each levels, for each of the levels of the residential building, and probably a section, although I can't remember. But it would have been the general layouts.
Did you look at those drawings at all when
Yes.
you conducted your review? In how much detail do you think you looked at those?
I can't remember.
Now, we've counted 9 sets of drawings that she had,
Right.
going back to 1971. when the building was designed. Did you review all of those, do you think?
I can't remember.
Do you remember whether you reviewed the draft that she had produced, the draft fire safety strategy, alongside the drawings?
Yes, I did.
You did. Did you check the measurements?
I can't remember.
What other documents did you have to hand when conducting your review of the draft that Ms. Cooney had sent you?
Approved document B.
Did you have the current fire risk assessment for Grenfell Tower to hand?
I think I did, but I can't remember.
Let's see if I can put the document in front of you and see if it triggers a recollection. Could you please be shown CST 6090, CST 6090. Now this is Carl Stokes's fire risk assessment dated the 29th of December 2010 for Grenfell Tower. Do you see that?
Yes.
Is that a familiar document to you, Dr. Barker, do you think?
I have read it, yes.
Yes, but does it trigger you having had a recollection of seeing it at the time you conducted your review of Ms. Cooney's report, or draft report?
Yes, I think I did see it.
I think you did.
Reviewed the
Okay.
report.
Did you say you had approved document B to hand. Do you remember which parts of approved document B you looked at when reviewing Ms. Cooney's draft?
Would have looked at B1 to B5.
B1 to B5. Right. Can I ask you to go back to your statement, please, in EXO 401603 and look at page 4 with me. Let's look at paragraph 3.14 together. You say, ordinarily, if I had any comments on the draft report, I would provide my comments by way of a manuscript markup and would discuss any queries with the author. However, I note from my email of the 16th of August 2012, that's the one we've just been looking at, that I replied to Ms. Cooney to say that I had reviewed the draft and it was fine. I'm not surprised that I had no comments on the existing FSR, given Ms. Cooney's capabilities and her background in building control, which would have meant that she was very experienced in working with fire safety strategies. Now, we can see from the two emails, the 15th of August and the 16th of August, that just under 24 hours elapsed between her sending her draft report to you and you reporting back to her that it was, as you call it, fine. Mm-hmm. How long did you actually spend reviewing her draft existing fire safety strategy report, do you think?
I can't remember. I would have said a couple of hours, but I don't remember.
Do you remember when that couple of hours was? Was it on the 15th, immediately on receiving it, or the morning of the 16th?
I would have thought that it would have been on the 16th.
Right. Given that that was your last day in the office, did you have other things on your plate?
Yes.
How did you review the report? Did you have a hard copy or did you review it on a screen?
I honestly can't remember. I usually did a hard copy, but I actually can't remember.
Did you make any notes at all while you reviewed the report?
Again, I can't remember.
Ms. Cooney told us when she gave evidence to the inquiry that you were quite fastidious about notebooks. That's what she said. And for those who are interested in seeing the transcript, it's day 14, page 88 at lines 8 to 9. I don't need to show you that. Mm-hmm. Did you make a note of your review in your notebook? I
may well have done, but I don't know. I would have to look in the notebook, but right. I don't have access to them.
Did you remember whether you made a note of your review on any hard paper document or of any kind?
I don't remember because I don't remember whether I reviewed that as a hard copy or an electronic copy. I can't remember. But I possibly would have noted it down in my notebook, what I'd done, as I tended to do that out of habit, so I knew what I'd done over the week.
Now, just looking a little bit more closely, if you would with me with your statement at paragraph 3.14 that we've got there on the screen, you say that the reason you give for not being surprised that you had no comments on her draft is that she had capabilities and background in building control, which would have meant that she was very experienced in working with fire safety strategies. Now, you don't say there that the reason you had no comments was because you were satisfied with the contents of the report itself. My question is, do we take it from what you do say and what you don't say there that you signed it off as fine purely because it had been authored by Miss Cooney, as opposed to having conducted a critical review of its contents?
No, I had reviewed its contents, and on the basis that I appreciate that there were gaps in the document where further information was required, and I understood that that would be fed back from the client or the design team once the draft had been submitted and they'd had a chance to read it and absorb it.
When you say, I'm not surprised I had no comments, is that you were not surprised when you came to write your witness statement in September 2018 that you had no comments, or that you were not surprised at the time?
I would say I wasn't surprised at the time.
And is that lack of surprise at the time because, as you say in your statement, of her experience of dealing with building control and working with fire
Yes,
safety
and her
strategies?
experience of writing fire strategies.
When you did your review, as you said you did, how much reliance did you place on Ms. Cooney's capabilities and her background and experience, as opposed to a cold-eyed review of the report itself?
I don't know, really. I would have said it was a review of what was written.
Did you go through her draft with a critical eye to check each line?
Yes, I read each line.
Yeah. Did you go through it with a critical eye? Or did you rely to some extent, greater or lesser, on the fact that she was experienced and capable?
I would say both, really. I went through it with a critical eye and also appreciated that Kate was competent.
Looking back on it now, and in the light of Dr. Lane's criticisms of the report, do you still think that it's fine?
There are areas that it could have been improved on, and that would have never have been sent out as a formal issue of a report.
Well, we'll come to look at it in due course. Just as a general question, can you explain why you signed it off as fine, given that there are areas that could have been improved on?
Well, there were areas that we needed more information on.
I see. Can we look at the Exova spreadsheet for fees, please? That is at EXO 401353. Now, I'd like to show the native version of that if I can, Mr. Operator. So can we look at that at EXO 00001353 native? Right. Now, if you can go to timesheets, will be shown timesheets, and then have the space bar on the bottom right of the document moved to the left so we can see the left-hand side, we can see together that we've got a job phase with dates, or numbers, I should say, down the left-hand side, all for Grenfell Tower. And we've just, I think, there we go. If you go to line 49, we can see that there are, between lines 49 and 54, or perhaps more pertinently, 49 and 52, we can see where Kate Cooney has marked hours, and we can see that she has put in hours on the 9th, the 10th, the 13th, and the 15th, and 6 hours on the 15th for her. You see that? Mm-hmm. And then there are 2 more times for the fire strategy for existing condition in September, 7th and 11th. We don't see any entry for you or your work there in those timesheets. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
So, on the documents, is it right that no hours were assigned to you in the billing system for your review of Ms. Cooney's draft?
Yes.
Why is that?
I probably put the time down for that day on my timesheet to a different job or to some other something else.
If you had done a thorough review of, you remember now, some 2 hours, is there any reason why you wouldn't have billed it to this file?
Well, probably didn't want to exceed the fee because my time would have gone over the fee.
Does that tell me if this is wrong, that the time you spent on reviewing it was limited by the amount of available fee left in the quote, as opposed to what a proper review in compliance with peer review procedures at Exova demanded?
No.
So, given that what was billed on this for the fee as at that point, which was still under the total fee proposal, I'm afraid it's disappeared from the screen temporarily. I wouldn't mind having it back, please. Well, let's proceed without the document if we can, and if you need to look at it again, we can. Given that what was billed on this for the fee at the time, which was still under the total fee, why didn't you bill the hours that you spent reviewing this report to the fee?
I don't know.
Why didn't you go back to Bruce Soanes or the TMO and say you needed more by way of a fee in order to do a proper job?
I don't think that I didn't do a proper job just because I didn't put time down to it. I put time down to a different project.
Is the reality that you didn't post any times at all for this review because your review was so brief that honesty forbade it?
No.
Now, we know you were busy. You and she were both going on holiday on the 17th, as of the evening of the 16th of August, and you weren't in the office on the 16th. I've been quite blunt about it, Dr. Barker. Are you quite sure that you didn't just sign off this report without reading it properly?
Yes, I'm quite sure.
And is the reason why you didn't bill any time to a review of Miss Cooney's draft is because you hadn't really spent any honestly billable time doing so?
No, I disagree with that.
Okay. Your comment in your email, I have reviewed it and it is fine, Was it usual in your experience at that time to give so little feedback after a peer review of such a report?
No, I usually gave more feedback than that. However, I can't remember whether I worked on a hard copy of the document or an electronic copy.
You would normally
So-
give feedback. You would normally give more feedback than that, is what you've said. Can you explain why this feedback deviated from the norm?
No, I can't remember.
Can I just go back with you, please, to Mr. Pearce, or Dr. Pearson's witness statement, EXO 401753, page 3. EXO 401753 at page 3. And we've read this before. This is
We
paragraph
haven't got
3.
it yet, Mr. Willett.
It's not here. Oh, there we are.
Paragraph 3.9. Mr. Chairman, I think we now have that. We looked at that before, Dr. Barker. Did you run through each of the checks that Dr. Pearson says Exova normally does when peer reviewing a report, when you reviewed Ms. Cooney's draft?
I believe I did.
Did you have any discussion or communication of any kind with Kate Cooney in the 24 hours between receiving her draft report and your telling her the next day that it was fine?
I don't remember.
If you don't remember that, and you don't, I think, have a document to show that you went through each of the checks Dr. Pearson describes in his statement there, what is the basis of your belief that you did go through Miss Cooney's draft, making sure that it complied with each of the 5 elements of a proper peer review process?
Because I did read it. I went through it.
Yes.
But it wouldn't necessarily have complied because it was an existing building. That it hadn't been designed to approve document B. We were using document B as a benchmark and showing what was provided in the building.
But the fact that it was a fire safety strategy report for an existing building wouldn't, would it, mean that the system of peer review of that report described by Dr. Pearson there would be different or wouldn't apply?
It would be slightly different in that there weren't any, from memory, any fire engineering analyses in terms of calculations in there, in Kate's report.
All right, but making allowances for the fact that this is an existing building, are you agreeing with what I'm suggesting to you, which is that making allowances for that difference, nonetheless a process of peer reviewing this report would have to comply with these elements?
Yes.
Yes. I'm going to ask you just 1 or 2 questions about version control. At the time, so August 2016, was Exova certified under ISO 9001?
I don't believe they were. They were working towards it.
I see. Did Exova have a document procedure which was in line or working towards ISO 9001?
In what way? I don't understand.
Well, did Exova have a document procedure, a document control procedure, as at the summer of 2012?
Yes, I believe they did, yes.
Can we look at EXO 401224, please? This is the project completion procedure internal to Exova, issued on the 1st of April 2010 and reviewed on the 1st of April 2012. You see that?
Yes.
Governing standards, ISO 9001-2008. Are you familiar with this document?
No.
You're not familiar with it?
No.
Is now the first time you've ever seen it?
I may have seen it, but I don't remember it.
Right. Can you explain how it would be that a senior fire engineer such as yourself within Exova, responsible for producing reports or peer reviewing reports of those done under your instructions, not be familiar with a project completion procedure?
No. But like I say, I may have seen the document, but I can't remember. And the project wasn't complete.
Well, we'll come to that. I'm just asking you to see if you can explain your lack of familiarity with this document. Leaving aside the document, were you aware in general terms of the fact that there was a document out there in Exova which had something to do with project completion?
Yes, I think I was aware.
Well, let's see if you were aware of the principles. Can we go to page 1 and look at section 4, closure of the project? For many projects, it says, the exact point at which the consultancy work has been completed is not always immediately evident. The project manager should make careful note of the scope of services provided in the contract documentation. This would initially be the fee proposal which was provided and the details confirmed on the fee acceptance form. You see that?
Yes.
And then it says Appendix A shows the flow chart. That to ensure that a high standard is maintained, the project manager is required to, and then there's a list of bullet points. The first of which is this, Dr. Barker, check that all elements of the project to have been completed satisfactorily. This will entail a review of the scope of services set out in the fee proposal and a specific review of the documents stored on the electronic filing system to determine that the scope of services have been completed. You see that?
Yes.
And then it goes on to say, or, so this is an alternative, contact the client or client's representative to ensure that they are satisfied that the scope of services matched with their expectations. Any comments from the client should be stored on the electronic filing system in the correspondence folder. Now, when you conducted your review of Ms. Cooney's draft report, did you have this internal guidance in your mind?
No.
Can you explain why that is?
Because the report that was sent out was a draft, and it was understood that elements needed to be discussed and clarified with the design team so that then a formal version of the final report could be issued.
I see.
So at that point, the project wasn't complete.
When you peer reviewed, I see, okay. What was the point of peer reviewing a draft that was incomplete then?
Because the report outlined the basic principles of B1 to B5. However, there were a number of clarifications and recommendations that Kate made that needed to be checked. So it was understood that that would happen at a later date, given that fairly regular design team meetings were being held for the project, for the refurbishment as well.
When you did your peer review, even though you say it was only a draft at that stage, did you undertake a review of the scope of services set out in the fee proposal?
Yes. Yes, I looked at the scope.
At any point during your involvement in this, I call it project, but the production of the existing fire safety strategy, did you ever check that all the elements of the project had been completed satisfactorily?
Yes, I checked, but I knew that they hadn't all been completed satisfactorily.
I see. Did there ever come a point in your involvement where you were satisfied that they'd been completed?
No.
I see. The version of the existing fire safety strategy that you reviewed was marked as a draft, wasn't it?
Yes.
We don't need to look at it. It will, I mean, if you want to, we can, and we will certainly be looking at it. Did you ask, or had you asked Ms. Cooney specifically to produce a draft?
Yes, that was quite common practice for projects. We would produce a draft, issue it, and then any comments that came back from the design team, we would incorporate and update to an issue.
Right. Now, if you look, please, at EXO 50577, this is an email from, the second one down, from Kate Cooney to Jean Watt, copied to you, Dr. Barker. And it follows on from a string below it. So just after you had gone back to her and told her it was fine, where she then sends it to Jean Watt for formatting. And there's a bit of discussion about that. And then in the second email down on that page, page 1, Kate Cooney says to Miss Watt, Jean, it is a draft at this stage anyway, but yes, tomorrow morning is fine. Can you explain what stage in the process Ms. Cooney is referring to when she says it's a draft at this stage?
I think she's meaning more that at this point in time it's a draft.
So not a formal stage in the production process?
No.
I see.
No.
Do you remember whether this document was intended to be sent to Studio E as a draft for its review?
Yes, it was meant to be sent to the design team. I believe it was sent to Bruce at Studio E.
I see. And when did you think it would cease to be a draft and become the final document?
I don't know. I assumed after seeing an email exchange between Terry and Bruce that it would be discussed at the next design team meeting.
And who would decide that it was a final report?
From my point of view, because when Terry came back, we had a discussion and the project essentially was handed back to London, it would be Terry.
I see. And would there be a peer review done at that stage?
Yes.
So there'd be a final, is this right, a final peer review? And who was going to conduct that final peer review? Do you remember?
I don't know.
Were you involved in the discussion as to what would happen to this draft
No.
at that stage? Kate Cooney told us that to prepare this kind of strategy to completion, it would take a number of weeks. She said solidly for a good number of weeks if it was to meet all the requirements. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
And she also said that this draft was the start of the process. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Given that this was only a first draft at the start of a much lengthier process, or certainly lengthier, if not much lengthier, can you explain why £2,111 odd pounds out of the £2,865 lump sum fixed fee for this was invoiced for this draft? Some 73% of the fee.
No, I can't explain.
Would that be unusual?
No, it was quite usual to invoice on a project for the time that you'd spent on it.
I understand that it might be usual to invoice for the time you've spent. Would it be unusual to have eaten up so much of the fixed fee, 73%, in producing what was only a first draft?
No, it was usual. That did happen.
Right. So would it be fair to say that the norm is that some 3/4 of the fee would be used in producing the first draft and its peer review?
It's difficult to say because it can vary so much from project to project.
I see. And for this particular draft existing fire safety strategy, what work would be needed? We touched on this before a little bit. What exactly would be needed by way of further work on Exova's part to be carried out to make it a final report to go to the client for its file?
I think the recommendations that Kate had listed needed to be looked at. Those were the main points.
And as part of your client care process, would you have followed up with the client to ensure that a final version was sent to the client?
I probably wouldn't have done once the project had been handed back to London.
I see. Okay, well, let's move on then in time. Well, perhaps I should ask you this question before we do. Did you ever yourself consider checking that a final version was sent to the client?
No, I didn't.
Was it unusual for a draft never to be finalised?
I would say fairly unusual. However, projects do vary in length, and quite often there can be a pause in between certain stages of the project.
Let's look at SEA 6048, please. This is an email sent by Bruce Soanes to Terry Ashton on the 30th of August 2012, copied to you and indeed Paul Dunkerton at the TMO. You see that?
Yes.
And he says, Terry, we have a meeting planned for the afternoon of the 6th, which is the date Kate returns, bounce back below, etc. And then in the second paragraph, he says, we need to go through the fire strategy existing draft received 16th of August, which has numerous recommendations, some of which may be unrealistic for an interim strategy. It is probably also a good time to make contact with the local fire officer to discuss the project. Now, you received this document by way of copy. Do you know if Mr. Ashton or you, or indeed anybody else at Exova, went through the draft existing fire safety strategy at that point, as Mr. Soanes said needed to be done?
I don't know whether they did, or whether that email from Bruce is his intention is to go through it at the meeting.
Did you react to this email in any way by going back to Mr. Soanes and asking him what needed to be done or gone through? Or
I didn't speak to Bruce. I do remember having a telephone conversation with Terry to tell him what we'd done on the project, and then I forwarded him the existing fire strategy draft.
Yes, let's look at that document. EXO 401607, please. And you can see the second email down on that first page of that string there, the email we've looked at just a minute ago. And then above it, we see the email from Terry Ashton to you on Monday the 3rd of September. Claire, can you please ring me regarding this? Just first of all, I think we discussed earlier Mr. Ashton coming back from illness.
Yes.
When did he first start becoming involved in the existing fire safety strategy? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Was he well involved by this point? Late August, early September 2012?
I think so. He'd returned to work on the 6th of August, so that's just under a month of being back.
Yeah.
Where I think he'd been working on the refurbishment side.
Just scrolling back in time then a little bit, given that he'd come back from work from illness, to work from illness on the 6th of August, did you have any discussions or contact with him between his coming back to work on that date and the production of the draft existing fire safety strategy on the 16th of August?
I don't think I did.
Right. Do you remember any discussions with him between the 16th of August and the 3rd of September on that subject, bearing in mind, of course, that you'd gone on holiday on the 17th of August?
No, I didn't
Right.
communicate with him then.
All right, let's look at this email then. He says, please ring me regarding this. Did you call him, having
Yes,
received
sir.
that email?
Yes, I telephoned Terry.
What was discussed? Do you remember?
Well, as I've just said, I told him about the project, I told him about the existing fire strategy draft that had been produced and sent to the design team. And then I forwarded him on the strategy. I can't remember what else was discussed.
Can we look, please, at EXO 50413? This is an email later the same day, 3rd of September, from you to Terry Ashton, and there's an attachment, draft 01, Grenfell Tower existing FSS using existing drawings, doc. And you say, here it is, cheers, Claire. Did he ask you to send that document to him?
Yes.
Do you know or do you remember why he wanted to see it?
I'm assuming that he wanted to read it and digest it before he went to the meeting.
Was Mr. Ashton, at this point, to your understanding, taking responsibility for this part of the project?
I believe he was, because he asked me in an email if I was the project manager on it, and I told him no, it was now going to be a London project.
You told him it was now going to be a London project. What else did you tell him about who was going to take responsibility for the draft existing fire safety strategy from that point onwards?
I don't remember discussing that specifically with him.
Was there any discussion to the effect that it was he who was going henceforth to take forward to completion the existing fire safety strategy?
There may have been during our telephone conversation, but I can't remember.
Do you know who was responsible from that date for ensuring that the existing fire safety strategy was completed and not simply left as a draft?
No, I don't know.
Can we go, please, to your witness statement, EXO 401603, at page 4, and look at paragraph 3.16. You say there, I had no more involvement with the existing FSR or with the Grenfell Tower refurbishment except for an email received on the 3rd of September 2012 from Mr. Ashton, which we'll come to look at in a minute. Did you ever inquire with him or with anybody else as to whether the draft from Ms. Cooney that you had signed off as fine on the 16th of August had been finalised?
No, I didn't.
And if we look, while we're on the same page in your statement at paragraph 3.17, you say in the last sentence, I am not aware of any changes being made to the existing FSR following that conversation or any further versions being requested. I think that conversation is the one that you referred to in the previous paragraph,
Yes.
3rd of September. Now, we know that Mr. Ashton produced his initial design note on the 12th of September 2012 using the draft existing fire safety strategy. To your understanding and recollection, Dr. Barker, does that tell us that Mr. Ashton produced that document simply using the draft as it stood?
I don't know.
You don't know. Can I ask you to look, please, at ART 50404? This is a design, it's a project meeting held on Thursday, the 6th of September 2012 at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at Appleyards. Now, you're not present there. Mr. Ashton from Exova is, along with Mr. Soanes and others from Studio E and others from the TMO. Do you see that?
Yes.
If you go, please, to page 2, under fire, it says this: Exova need to understand the existing situation and whether LFB do test the system twice a year and what was behind the proposed upgrade works to the smoke exhaust stroke fire. The statutory position on the design needs to be established, as it's not possible for building control to insist on enhancements. Draft fire strategy needs detailed interrogation, and a meeting was arranged with SE, Studio E, early next week to review. Did Mr. Ashton discuss with you the need for detailed interrogation of the draft?
No.
Did Mr. Ashton come back to you after this meeting, do you remember, in order to take forward the process of a detailed interrogation?
No.
I see. Was there, in your mind, a moment when you were clear that your involvement in the production of the existing fire safety strategy had stopped?
Yes, I would consider it to be when I had the telephone conversation with Terry, and I believe there is an email where he'd asked if we were running the project, and I did state that no, the project needed to continue from the London office.
So, in your mind, okay, and do you remember ever having any kind of handover from yourself to Mr. Ashton about the existing fire safety strategy?
Other than the telephone conversation between myself and Terry, no.
No, and that conversation was the one we discussed earlier.
Yes. And
3rd
then,
of
and
September.
then I sent him the existing fire strategy draft report.
After that conversation.
Yes.
So are we to take it from that you never handed over the report to him, took him through it, showed him where the gaps were and what further information was needed, and then said to Terry Ashton, over to you?
No.
Right. I'd like now to... sorry, before I do that, one or two more questions. Who was responsible for invoicing the first draft? Because we know if an invoice went for the first draft. Do you know why that was?
It was usually the admin team that set up the invoicing for the month. So based on what's on the timesheets, would be invoiced. It wasn't done by each individual fire engineer.
I see. Did you have any direct contact with the billing department to tell them to send out an invoice when the first draft was completed?
No.
Do you know why Exova invoiced for it when, according to Kate Cooney, so much more was left to do?
No, I don't know why.
Right. Now, I'd now like to turn to a different topic, which is to look at the existing fire safety strategy itself. And as a reminder to you, Dr. Barker, you said you'd reviewed it and you'd said no more about it other than it was fine. It's at CST 00003114. We can just look at that. And there it is, watermarked draft. So it's quite clear that it's a draft, and it was a report to Kensington and Chelsea TMO, although it was, I think, sent to Studio E. In your mind, were you clear that both you and Ms. Cooney knew that your client was the TMO?
I don't remember.
Okay. If we look, and I'm going to dot around, I'm afraid, between this document and the fee proposal. Can we just look back at the fee proposal? TMO 100377721. We looked at this earlier on. I just want to remind you of what it says. On page 2, if we can go there, please, under proposed scope of work, we looked at this before. It says that the design of the building will be assessed against the relevant design codes, and then they're referred to. You see that? My question is, when you look at the existing fire safety strategy, the draft, we don't find any assessment of, or in fact any mention of, the requirements of the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005, or Section 20 of the London Building Acts, Amendment Act 1939. Do you know why that is?
Because the building was being assessed under the relevant design code, so it's being assessed to the guidance in approved document B.
Yeah, the proposed scope of work, though, actually says the relevant design codes relating to the statutory requirements on the design of the building under the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005 and the London Building Acts. You correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Barker, but approved document B is not a document which is produced or generated under the authority of the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005, is it?
No.
So given that the relevant design codes relate to the statutory requirements on the design of the building under those two statutes, the RRO and the London Building Acts, as amended, why were those not referred to in the draft as opposed to ADB?
The RRO, the requirements for the RRO is that the responsible person should carry out a suitable and sufficient risk assessment. And then the Section 20 requirements apply, and there are requirements to do with firefighting access that apply. However, the design of the building was assessed under the relevant design code. So you assess a building using a design code, and then once the building is assessed, that then informs the person carrying out the risk assessment so that they can fulfil their requirements under the RRO. And the risk assessment in the residential buildings covers the common areas. It doesn't cover the flats themselves.
Yeah, I can understand, Dr. Barker, that approved document B would be relevant. What I'm trying to get to the bottom of is why there is no assessment of, or even any mention of, the requirements of the RRO or the London Building Acts in the report.
I don't know.
Can you help me with this, Dr. Barker? What are the relevant design codes under the RRO?
Well, a relevant design code will be a piece of guidance that you use to show that your building meets the functional requirements. So the building design, so the codes will be the design codes, for example, approved document B, or if you were designing a hospital, HTM, the Health Technical Memorandum.
But you've just told Mr. Millett, sorry to interrupt you, that they're not issued under the RRO.
No, there's two sides to it really. You've got the design of the building has to meet the functional requirements of the building regulations, and you can use approved document B to assess that as one of your design codes. Then under the RRO, that is putting in place measures to ensure that what fire safety measures you have got in your building are maintained. So you need the fire strategy first so that you know what those measures are. And then the person who's carrying out the risk assessment can assess the building and see that those measures are in place.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Millett.
No, Mr. Chairman, that's helpful. So, coming back to my question for the last time on this, although the proposed scope of work specifically identified that the design of the building would be assessed against the relevant design codes relating to the statutory requirements on the design of the building under the RRO and the LBA, my question is, why was there no assessment or even a mention of those requirements in the report?
I don't know.
Okay. What work would you have expected to be carried out to assess the design of the building against the relevant design codes relating to the statutory requirements on design of the building under the RRO?
It would have been an assessment of the existing building layouts.
With a view to advising on or ensuring that those building layouts complied with the RRO. I make that as a statement. That's a question.
It was a way of looking at the building to see, do the travel distances meet with the current requirements and other safety provisions, because the building was going to be refurbished. So I think it was a benchmark to see where is the building now in terms of compliance, because then following the building work, it was important to ensure that if the building didn't comply, it was made no worse following the building work.
Now, can I take you to a part of the report, the existing fire safety strategy, partly by way of correction of a question, but partly to take the point forward a little bit. If you look, please, at TMO 1925, this is page 8. Just wait for it to come up. We do, in fact, see a reference to the RRO in there. If we go to page 8, paragraph 3.25, under common areas, do you see at the bottom? And I think I may have put to you that there's no reference at all to the RRO. In fact, there is. There's one, and it's under common areas. And you see there that you're talking about an audible fire alarm not required to common areas of residential buildings, etc. Mm-hmm. And then you can see what's said there. And then control of this, which is corridors and stairways, is a duty of the management under the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005. So it looks from that Ms. Cooney had in mind the need to examine or report on the duty of management under the Regulatory Reform Order so far as common areas are concerned. But the RRO isn't mentioned anywhere else in the report. My question is, did you, when you did your review, note that but for that one reference, the RRO had not been referred to anywhere, notwithstanding the reference in the scope of services in the fee proposal?
No.
Did it concern you at the time that there was no mention, apart from in that one instance, of the RRO?
No, because the report was more concerned with the building design and compliance with the functional requirements of the building regulations.
Yeah, in order to and you know, because it said it in the fee proposal, that part of it was in order to inform the management plan.
Yes.
Yes. Are you aware of, or were you at the time aware of the duties imposed on the responsible person by the RRO?
Yes.
And were you aware at the time that, or let me put it this way, did you think at the time that it would be important for your client, the TMO, to understand fully whether the building allowed it to comply with the requirements on it as the responsible person under the RRO?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase the question, please?
Yes. Well, let me try it a different way. Did you think it was important for your client, the TMO, to understand whether it was compliant or not compliant with its obligations under the RRO at the time?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Mm-hmm.
You say you don't know, or you
I can't remember.
Can't remember. Were you familiar at the time with Article 13 of the RRO, which relates to the obligation on the responsible person to ensure that the premises are equipped with appropriate firefighting equipment, fire detectors and alarms?
Yes.
Did you notice, when you did your review of Ms. Cooney's work, that there was no analysis of the extent to which the existing building complied with that article?
I do think that the strategy does refer to means of warning within the building.
Did you have it in your mind that that was something that you should be looking out for?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm afraid I'm in the middle of this, and I note the time, but it's probably a convenient moment.
Yes, because if you continue, it'll take you, what, 10 or 15 minutes?
Well, we're on a series of things. I should just tell you, Dr. Barker, so you know where we are, and also the panel, that we are now going to examine a number of aspects of this report, which will take up the bulk of the rest of your examination, and there's no easy way of calling a halt to that. But we're going to turn to a different part of the same document, so it'll be convenient. Yes.
Again, help us, if you can, Mr. Millett. We can afford to take an hour for lunch, can we?
We can, yes.
Well, Dr. Barker, we're going to break now so we can all get some lunch. We'll come back at 2 o'clock, please.
Yeah.
And please don't talk to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room. All right? Thank you very much. Give it the usher. Good. On course to finish today?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you very much. 2 o'clock, please.